Hi, my name is Emma Tobias. I am wearing a beautiful, gorgeous night dress a la Little House on the Prairie, a la Nosferatu, starring Lily Rose Depp. I also made this crown with my name, and I am drinking a rosé in a can, and I'm sweating because it's unseasonably warm. In this here book that my mother beautifully made, because if you watch my last video, which statistically you probably didn't, you know my mother is very funny, but she's also very talented. I printed out my favorite and least favorite books in a variety of genres of 2024, and we are gonna go on that journey together. I've also done the hard work of keeping track via Storygraph. If I read that book via audiobook, or if I read that book via e-reader / physical book, and you will be able to tell by the size of the photo that I insert over there. Let's start with fantasy. Ooh, fantasy! I reread Shades of Grey by Jasper Fforde because the newest book, Red Side Story, came out this year. I liked it, didn't love it, love Shades of Grey. I read this book probably 10 years ago. I decided to reread it in anticipation of the sequel. I love Jasper Fforde. Love that this book is basically Brave New World, except it's all based on Munsell's color theory. I hear in my mind sometimes the narrator go, Vermilion. Husbands. I loved Husbands. This is probably up there as my favorite cross all of the genres book of the year. I sort of read this with Emma from Drinking by My Shelf when we were both in London, but she got ahead of me because I'm slow at finishing physical books. Anyway, Husbands. This is a book about a magical attic. This young lady comes home from a hen do, and she's like a little drunky, and she looks down and she's like, hey, I have a ring on my finger, and also there's a man here saying, my wife, sort of thing. Anyway, so she has a magical attic, and every time a husband comes up, a new husband comes down, and her life is a little bit different, or a lot a bit different. This book is really life-affirming, love-affirming, friendship-affirming, delightful, exciting, Bridget Jones' Diary if it was magical. Loved. How to Summon a Fairy Godmother. Now, this book sort of crept up on me. I didn't know how I felt about it when I was listening to it, and then I've thought about it a lot, and I want to read the next book. This is about one of the stepsisters from Cinderella who's like, okay, Cinderella got her life, going great. I want that too. So she figures out that Cinderella summoned a fairy godmother and she wants to do the same. But this fairy godmother is like, you have to prove to me that you have a good heart and a good soul. So I'm gonna make you go into the fae world and do some jobs for me. It's funny, it's interesting, it's inventive while also being, based on a classic story. It makes you think about likability in women and how stories are told about women. And I just enjoyed it greatly. If you like fae books, you should give this one a try because it's got all the, the staples. It's got the little juice that they drink and the humans go crazy. It's got hot fae and mean fae. It's got all that fae stuff. The Book That Wouldn't Burn. Now, I read both of the books that are currently out in this series. It is about a library. It is about librarians. It is about different races of people who can't quite get along because they go to war a lot. It's about prejudice. It's about learning and education. It's about opportunity. It's about sacrifice. It is very in the high fantasy zone, but not too many horses, because that's really when I draw the line with high fantasy, is when we bring out too many horses or dragons. So think of it like Game of Thrones without horses or dragons, and also a library. Did that make sense? I quite enjoyed it. I found it to be like a cozy little hug, but it was also pretty depressing. Speaking of depressing, my least favorite fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction of the year, The Ministry of Time. I know you're shocked. The Ministry of Time is a very beloved book of this year, 2024. It is about an institution, a government institution, I do believe in the UK, who are able to bring back certain historical figures before they And it follows an agent who is tasked with this like guy who went on like Arctic expedition in the 1800s and has to like watch over him. It's a bit of a love story. It's a bit of a spy novel kind of vibe. I didn't like it. I know I said all those words and you're probably like, that sounds good. Or you read it and you're like, it is good. I had trouble because I felt like the main character, who's a woman, was incredibly flat. I was very uninterested in her narration. I was uninterested in her development as a character. I felt like it was boring. I didn't really understand why I should care about this person other than her profession. So it just was a little hollow for me. Map of the Other Lands, which is the second book in the Emily Wilde Encyclopedia of Fairies series. I really liked the first book. This is the second book, another fave book. I just was bored. I should have been excited about this because I really did enjoy the first book. This might just, suffer from second book syndrome, but I did not like it. I was incredibly bored. Wicked. I don't want to talk about this book. I loved the film. I did not like the book. I don't think I really should have to explain that. Google what is in the book. Now, saying that, am I interested in reading all the other Wicked books? I kind of am. Nonfiction, baby. Nonfiction. Read a lot of nonfiction this year. Let's hit it. Faves. Among the Bros. This is a true crime story about College of Charleston in the late 2010s and a drug scandal involving some fraternity brothers. It's really interesting. It hit quite close to home for me in terms of like, oh, I probably am like 1 degree of separation from some of these people. It was really interesting, entertaining, exciting, sad. Just kind of what you want when you read something like a true crime story. You want it to be a little salacious and a little depressing, and that's what you have with Among the Bros. Another Among the book, Among the Thugs. Now, I was reorganizing my boyfriend's bookshelves because, guys, the paper part was facing at me. You know what I mean? Like the pages, and that, that's not okay. So I fixed that. And I stumbled upon this book. He had read part of it for a class when he was in college, and I picked it up. It was written in the early 90s. It is about a guy, a journalist, who was American and basically ingratiated himself into the hooligan culture, soccer, football culture in the UK in the 1980s. If you don't know anything about that, there was a lot of violence. It ran like a gang. Really, really intense. This book, the cover, it says like, it's like Clockwork Orange, but real and maybe more horrifying. It was horrifying. Lots of talk about racism, lots of talk about neo-Nazis, and this was happening in the 1980s in the UK. So if you think that anywhere is better than America, you're wrong. Everywhere is bad. Cue the sun. This is a book about the history of reality TV, and that is all I'm gonna say. I love reality TV. I like histories of culture specifically. I thought this book was really, really interesting, and if you watch the movie The Woman of the Hour, the Anna Kendrick film, I would read this because it talks about that story in this book. How to Say Babylon. This is one of the first books I read this year. It is a memoir about a woman who grew up in a strict Rastafarian household in Jamaica. It delves into sexism, abuse, and a very difficult familial dynamic, specifically with her father, but it is beautiful. The writer is like a poet. She's a gorgeous writer. I would really recommend the audiobook. You're just totally in it. Like, you're totally like pushed into this world through her writing, and not a lot of memoirists are able to do that, but she was able to do that. I was like, I feel the ocean breeze. Okay, my least favorite books, nonfiction books. I always have trouble talking about my least favorite nonfiction books because I never want to discount someone's experience, but sometimes I'm not interested in their experience, I find out, or I don't love the way that they wrote about it. First off, Men Have Called Her Crazy. This is the memoir, much discussed, much discourse about it, written by Anna Marie Tendler, who is John Mulaney's ex-wife. This is all about her experience having a sort of a mental breakdown and going to a care center clinic to deal with what's going on with her. It doesn't mention John Mulaney, but it's pretty obvious that I think her divorce maybe contributed to what happened, and it felt hollow when you're missing such a big part of the story. A lot of the criticism, Celebrity Memoir Book Club, which is a great podcast, talked about this. It felt a lot like she was saying, I used to be not a girl's girl, but today I am a girl's girl, but actually I'm not like other girls. And that is kind of how it felt. I will say the part of it that I did like was her talking about her friendships with other women that she met. So, Burn Book. This is a book written by a woman who is a tech journalist in Silicon Valley forever. It is not a burn book. She's not out here like spilling dirt or secrets. She does a lot of like apologizing for bad men like Elon Musk, while also being like, you know, I tell him that he's a dick or he's being a dick, but you know, I think he's probably not that bad of a guy. That's all you need to know. Capote's Women. This is the book that led to the TV show with all those fabulous middle-aged women in it. I just felt like the author hated women. And I felt like, well, that's funny because Capote obviously hated women. So I feel like maybe they were aligned on that. I read some books this year in categories where I just liked the books that I read in those categories. I didn't have any that I disliked. Classics. I read, as I mentioned in a couple videos ago, A Room with a View. Gorgeous. Loved it. Cold Comfort Farm. Loved it. I described it to my boyfriend as sort of like an Ocean's 8, Ocean's 11, Ocean's movie about a young woman from the cité going to stay with her extended family on a farm and fixing everything so easily. So satisfying. And then getting a happy ending. Let's talk about general fiction and literary fiction, and we're gonna move quickly. Literary fiction. Intermezzo, Sally Rooney. You know, I wasn't a Normal People fan. I wasn't a Conversations with Friends fan, but I liked her last novel, All the Beautiful Where Are You Happened to Me book, and I really like Intermezzo. Two brothers having a time. I thought it was very good. The Extinction of Irina Ray. I feel like this should have been on more people's favorite books of the year list, but it came out at the beginning of the year, so I feel like it got lost in the shuffle. This is a book told in a really meta way. It's basically someone translating a story about something that they were also involved with. Specifically, a group of translators in this world every few years goes to this famous literary author's home to translate her novel because she's like ultra famous, ultra important. And while they're there, she disappears and they're trying to figure out what happened to her. It's kind of speculative, but definitely more literary speculative vibes. I really, really enjoyed it. You hate every character in a way that I find fascinating. And I really, really just was completely blown away by it. The Happy Couple. I love this author. Love this author. I loved Exciting Times. Happy Couple. Beautiful. It's a book about a few days leading up to a wedding of two people, and we hear from every single person related to this wedding in chapters about this wedding, this couple. I loved it. It's funny, it's smart, it's aching. I just ate it up. I ate it up. The Wedding People. I read this book during the hurricane, so it has a special place in my heart, but I also think it was maybe my favorite book I read this year. It is about a very unhappy divorced woman who goes to a hotel, like basically just leaves her life and books this really, really fancy hotel that she had talked about going to with her ex-husband. And she is there to end her life, but some hijinks occur, meaning that there is an entire wedding booked out at this resort hotel, and she is literally the only person not a part of this wedding, and she becomes friends with the bride and really involved in this wedding. It's an incredibly life-affirming book. Despite the fact that it starts very dark, I think it handles the subject matter very well and deftly, at least in my opinion, and I laughed and I cried and I had a great time. Chain Gang All-Stars is a book about a world in which the prison industrial complex has sort of like become worse, and now prisoners can choose to be in a terrible, terrible prison situation or be in a terrible, terrible 24/7 reality show a la The Hunger Games, where they're in groups and then they have to survive through the days and then they're sent to a coliseum to their death. It's very, very dark and very intense, but I thought it was really, really well done. It also has these sort of asides where it talks about the real life history of prisons. I just thought that it handled education with speculative fiction that felt a little, pretty close to home, really, really, really well. My two least favorite literary general fiction books of the year, Help Wanted. This was on Obama's favorite books of the year list, I'm pretty sure. And I'm going to tell you right now, Barack Obama, you were wrong about a lot of things, but you were wrong about this the most. This book is super boring. It's basically the show Superstore, but if every single character was incredibly unlikable. And you know what? I think the truth lies somewhere between Superstore and this book. And yeah. All Fours by Miranda July on a lot of publications' favorite books of the year list, but I read this in a book club with 3 other women and we all hated it. This is about a woman going through menopause, and she sort of loses it and decides to go to this random town, despite the fact she has a daughter, and redecorate a motel room and fall in love with a breakdancing young man, married man. It annoyed the shit out of me. I found the main character so insufferable. I can't even put it to words. And I've said in this video, I don't mind a dislikable character. I think a dislikable character is really interesting. This sucked. No. Finally, romance, my final section. Romance. Done and dusted. This is the hit, sort of breakthrough romance of the year. It is a Western romance set on a ranch involving a young woman who comes home after being like I think, or she's like a fast horse rider. I don't know. She comes back, she ends up falling in love with her brother's best friend. I thought it was really cute. I thought it was well done. I thought the world building worked. I was into it. However, I also read the sequel, which was Swift and Saddles, and I thought everything that worked in that first book did not work in the second book. I found the main characters to have no chemistry. I thought the main female character was really aggravating. She's always just like, you leave me alone. And the guy's just like opening the door for her or saying good morning, and she's just like, don't look at me. Raiders of the Lost Heart, loved. This is like an Indiana Jones sort of romance. If that doesn't make you interested, I don't know what will. It was exciting. It was fun. It had a plot besides the romance, which is the way to my heart to love a romance novel. Loved it. How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. Loved this book. Loved it. I've been a fan of Yulin Kwong for a long time. When she was making Kissing in the Rain, if anyone knows that particular series. Now she's writing these books and writing screenplays for Emily Henry. I'm here for it. I feel like a lot of people have talked about this book, but this is about basically 2 people who have a shared trauma, but for very opposite reasons, who end up, despite the fact this very serious thing happened, all in love. I really enjoyed it. You will notice that Emily Henry's Funny People is not on this list because I haven't read it yet. I know, fake fan. But I was a fan of Emily Henry before TikTok got a hold of her, so. In this video, I just want to say all of the books that people wrote in the comments of my first video back, I'm going to try to read in January. So if you told me one of your favorite books and I haven't read it already, I am going to try to read it in January. If you have not commented or didn't have one yet and you want to be included in this list, please comment down below what your favorite book of the year was, and I will try to read it in January and do a vlog. So I think that'll be fun. All right, see you soon.